Have you ever thought that the absolute worst moment of your life and the absolute best could be separated by exactly 10 minutes on the clock? All starting on a bone-chilling morning when I was standing waist-deep in freezing water, hands cuffed behind my back, on the very dock I've owned for over a decade? Let me rewind the tape a bit. Let me take you back to that fateful dawn when Karen Sterling, the newly minted, power-drunk HOA president of Pineview Harbor Estates, was screaming in my face, her bright red manicured finger pointed at my nose like a loaded weapon, while a poor, bewildered deputy named Officer Miller fumbled with his handcuffs, his face radiating pure embarrassment at having to arrest an old man and fishing waders in his own backyard. Arrest him? He is a trespasser, Karen shrieked, her voice a piercing siren tearing through the morning silence, spit flying in her blind rage, drowning out the gentle lap of waves against my old aluminum boat. "Ma'am, this is my property," I said calmly, even as the icy lake water soaked through my thermal underwear, "and I am standing on my own land." "Not anymore," she screamed, triumphant like a conqueror claiming a new colony. "I'm having you thrown in jail for illegal boat launching and destroying community aesthetics." The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around my wrists with a dry snap, and I looked up to see 15 neighbors gathered on their decks, phones raised high, recording this insanity, the smell of morning coffee mixing with the scent of lake algae and Karen's nauseatingly strong perfume. But here is the kicker, the thing that Karen, or anyone filming, didn't see coming. 10 minutes after that squad car pulled away, I held the key to utterly dismantling the little kingdom she was trying to build, and I did it by buying the very Marina she was desperate to steal. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and this story isn't just about an old man protecting his dock. It's about how I, a retired electrician and widower, accidentally lit the fuse on the bloodiest legal war in Pineview history, all starting from the ache of losing my wife, Emily. 3 years ago, cancer took Emily from me, leaving me hollow inside this 12-acre lakefront property we bought 15 years ago as our retirement paradise, the place where we used to sit together every morning, watching the mist lift off the water, listening to the loons call, the scent of pine needles mixing with her lavender shampoo in the dawn air. After Emily passed, that beat-up 12-foot aluminum boat and my German Shepherd, Buster, became the only reasons I got out of bed at 5 a.m., because being out on the water wasn't just a hobby, it was a lifeline keeping me from drowning in a sea of grief. But that fragile piece was pulverized 6 months ago when Karen Sterling rolled into town like a Category 5 hurricane. A razor-sharp 55-year-old woman who drove her pristine white SUV like a tank, always dressed for a corporate hostile takeover even when she was just checking the mail. Karen had been a city council member before the voters booted her out for being insufferable, and now she viewed Pineview Harbor Estates as her government in exile, a place where she could write the laws and punish anyone who dared to breathe too loudly. Christmas lights up on January 2nd? $200 fine. Dog barks during daylight? $150. Garden gnome facing the wrong way? Don't even ask. I tried to stay invisible, paid my dues, kept my yard spotless, but I made the mistake of thinking I could fly under the radar of a predator as hungry for control as Karen. The declaration of war arrived in my mailbox on a rainy Tuesday, on official HOA letterhead with Karen's pretentious, flowing signature, slapping me with a $500 fine for unauthorized watercraft storage causing visual pollution inconsistent with community aesthetic standards, and demanding I demolish my dock immediately because it was now deemed common property. Reading that attached letter, written on pink stationery that reeked of cheap floral scent, my blood boiled as she referred to my little fishing boat as a liability to premium market positioning, while she sat in a concrete palace where she'd bulldozed a historic cottage to build an illegal sand beach that violated every environmental code in the county. I called her that night, foolishly hoping for reason, but her voice over the phone was cold enough to freeze the lake. "There is no mistake, Mr. Caldwell. The board has determined your individual facility undermines property values. You have 30 days to remove it or face escalating penalties. Do not contact me again." 3 days later, I found a summons to an emergency meeting taped to my front door, not mailed, but hand-delivered like a medieval decree, demanding the mandatory attendance of all waterfront owners. When I walked into the community center that Thursday night, I expected a dozen people, but instead, I found 40 neighbors packed into uncomfortable metal folding chairs under humming fluorescent lights that sounded like angry wasps, the air thick with tension. Karen sat behind a folding table like a Supreme Court justice, flanked by her secret weapon, Julian, her lawyer nephew, a pale, nervous-looking guy who kept adjusting his tie like it was choking him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Karen began, her voice echoing off the concrete walls, "we are here to address a serious threat." And she gestured toward me like I was an eco-terrorist. "Mr. Ethan Caldwell has constructed unauthorized maritime infrastructure that encroaches on common waters, creating liability for all of us." The sucker punch came when Julian unrolled a brand new survey map, claiming my dock extended 15 feet into HOA-controlled water, sending a ripple of murmurs through the room, eyes turning toward me, some sympathetic, some suspicious. I stood up slowly, pulling out the original deed and survey Emily had insisted we keep in the fireproof safe back in 2009, one of her many acts of wisdom saving my ass long after she was gone. "Ma'am, with all due respect," I said, unfolding my documents. "My deed clearly states water rights extending 200 feet from the shoreline, including all mineral and access privileges in perpetuity, far beyond my modest 30-foot dock." Julian turned the color of old milk when he saw the original stamps, whispering something to Karen that made her jaw clench, but she recovered with practiced arrogance. "Surveys can be outdated. Boundaries evolve. The HOA has a fiduciary duty to protect common areas from individual appropriation." That was when Mrs. Higgins, my 78-year-old neighbor, stood up with surprising dignity to defend me, noting I'd been here before the HOA even existed, but Karen cut her down ruthlessly. "Personal favors do not establish legal precedent. If someone gets hurt on that illegal dock, we all pay. Our insurance does not cover rogue structures." She was playing the fear card, threatening everyone's wallet to isolate me. The meeting ended in awkward silence, neighbors avoiding eye contact as they filed out, terrified of being caught in the crossfire, and I knew right then that war had officially begun. But Karen didn't stop there. The following Monday, I woke up to find a uniformed security guard standing at the water's edge, clipboard in hand, staring at my dock like it was a crime scene. It was Travis, Karen's unemployed son-in-law, a soft-looking guy trying to look tough in a crisp uniform that still had the creases from the packaging. "Sir, I'm conducting lakefront patrol. Your dock is a designated violation zone requiring daily monitoring." The absurdity hit me like a slap. Karen wasn't just petty. She was funneling HOA funds to employ her family to harass me on my own land. Over the next week, while Travis played toy soldier, parking his truck to block my driveway every morning at 6 a.m., I spent my afternoons at the county recorder's office, burying myself in dusty files, and that is where I struck gold. Martha, the county clerk who had been there for 30 years, pulled me aside and whispered, "Honey, you might want to look at this," sliding Karen's election paperwork across the counter. It turned out, the election that put her in power violated the bylaws. She had only sent notice to half the residents via regular mail, not certified, meaning legally, her presidency was a ghost. I photocopied everything, hands shaking, but I knew I needed a nuclear option, and the opportunity fell into my lap when I discovered Karen's next move. She was planning to buy the only commercial marina on the lake, the Harbor Marina, to convert it into an exclusive HOA asset, effectively cutting off my only alternative access to the water. But she made a fatal error. She was planning to use the HOA emergency fund to buy it, which was blatant embezzlement. And more importantly, when I dug into the marina's file, I found that the lease held by the current operator, Old Man Mel R., had expired 2 years ago. As Martha flipped open the heavy, dust-covered ledger from 1994, my heart hammered against my ribs like a war drum. The yellowed pages revealing legal text so black and white it would drain the color right out of Karen's face. Lake access guaranteed to all original property owners in perpetuity, including boat launching and dock construction. But the real bomb, the tactical nuke, was on page 12, which clearly stated that the lease for the Harbor Marina with the Development Corporation had expired on December 31st, 2022. That was 2 years ago. According to the covenant, when a commercial lease expires without renewal, the property reverts to the county for tax auction. Technically, They are squatting, Martha said, adjusting her reading glasses. The property is in tax default for about $12,000, and it's scheduled for auction this Friday morning at 10 a.m. Friday, 3 days away. While Karen was busy secretly negotiating a $50,000 cash deal with Old Man Miller, using the HOA's emergency funds to turn the marina into a private club, she had no idea the man she was bribing didn't even own the dirt he was standing on. I walked out of that county office with a plan so crazy it just might work. I was going to liquidate my retirement savings and buy the marina right out from under her nose. I immediately assembled a war council, a group of unlikely but fierce allies. Eleanor Vance, a retired shark of a lawyer who ate HOA boards for breakfast. Commissioner Davis, a county official tired of the legal mess at the lake. And the Original Owners Alliance, led by my neighbor Frank, people who were sick of Karen's tyranny. This is beautiful, Eleanor said, reviewing my evidence with the predatory grin of a wolf smelling blood. She's violated so many statutes I could spend a week just listing them. But you buying the marina, that is the kill shot. You'll hold all the cards. I went to the bank to see Mr. Kim, my banker of 20 years, to withdraw $30,000. He looked at me, equal parts concerned and impressed. You're buying a marina just to teach your neighbor a lesson? Ethan, I really hope you win. Meanwhile, Karen launched a smear campaign on social media, creating fake accounts to spread rumors that I was losing my mind with grief, that the death of my wife had made me unstable and dangerous, causing new neighbors to cross the street when they saw me walking Buster. The harassment peaked when Travis, the son-in-law guard, showed up at the marina with a clipboard of fake forms, declaring himself a safety inspector and threatening to shut down operations if they didn't comply with Karen's imaginary rules. You know, Travis, I said, barely restraining the urge to toss him into the lake. Your mother-in-law has zero jurisdiction here, and you are currently impersonating an official. He stammered, turned beet red, and slunk away, but I knew Karen wouldn't stop until she controlled everything. Friday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of autumn. I sat on my dock drinking coffee, watching the mist rise, feeling Emily's presence in the breeze, almost hearing her whisper, "Go get him, Tiger." I got a text from Tommy, a dockhand at the marina, and Travis's decent cousin, saying Karen was frantically calling around because a rumor had leaked that someone was interested in the property, but she was too late. At exactly 10 a.m., in the county courthouse, the auction began in a small room with 20 folding chairs, smelling of floor wax and burnt coffee. Item 47B, Harbor Marina Property. Opening bid $12,347 for back taxes, Commissioner Davis announced clearly. I looked around. Only 3 other people were there, and none of them cared. I bid the opening. I raised my hand, my pulse thumping in my ears. Any other bids? Going once. Going twice. Sold to Mr. Caldwell. It took less than 5 minutes and $12,000. And just like that, I owned the marina Karen needed to choke me out. The rush of victory was stronger than any fish I'd ever caught. But the celebration was short-lived. My phone rang, and Eleanor was cackling on the other end. Ethan, you won't believe this. Karen just called my office trying to hire me to file an emergency injunction to stop the auction. She's screaming about conspiracies and fraud. She is completely unraveling. That afternoon, the queen herself, Karen, stormed down to the marina, dragging Julian and Travis behind her, her high heels hammering the wooden planks like a judge's gavel, her perfectly made-up face contorted in rage. Mr. Caldwell, she hissed, stabbing a finger in my direction. This fraudulent acquisition will not stand. You think you can outsmart me? I will have this sale overturned before the weekend is out. I smiled, leaning casually against the railing. Good luck with that, Karen. The county is just happy to have the taxes paid. And by the way, this is now private property. Get off my dock. Desperation forced Karen into one final, fatal mistake. She cornered me alone on Saturday morning, playing the role of the sweet peacemaker, offering a compromise where she would change the bylaws to let me keep my dock if I gave the HOA control over the marina schedule. She didn't know I knew she was recording the conversation on her phone, planning to edit it to make me sound like an extortionist. But she definitely didn't know that I was recording, too, in high definition. And when Karen called an emergency community meeting the following Thursday to expose the truth about me to the entire neighborhood. She was signing her own death warrant. The community center that night felt like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. Over 60 people were crammed into the small space, the fluorescent lights beaming down on Karen's triumphant face as she stood at the podium, ready to deliver the final blow. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice trembling with manufactured outrage. "Mr. Caldwell has not only hijacked public property, but is using it to blackmail this association." And she pressed play on her edited recording, where my voice had been chopped up to sound like a criminal making demands. The room buzzed with whispers, but I remained seated in the third row, clutching a thick manila envelope, calm as the eye of a storm, waiting for the trap to snap shut. When she finished her speech calling for my ostracization, I stood up slowly, walked to the front, and slammed my folder onto her table with a heavy thud that silenced the room. "Nice story, Karen," I said, my voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "But I think everyone deserves to hear the unedited version." I pulled out my phone, connected it to the hall's Bluetooth speaker, and played the full conversation. The room listened in stunned silence as Karen's voice filled the air, revealing her as a manipulative liar trying to bribe and bully me. Her face drained of color, turning from flush red to ghostly white, but I wasn't done. And this, I opened the folder, holding up the 1994 Lake Covenant, proves that the HOA never had authority over the water. That right belongs to every resident, forever. Next, I tossed down the election fraud evidence. "You were never legally the president because you violated the notification statutes." And finally, I delivered the knockout punch. "This proves you intended to embezzle $50,000 from the emergency fund to buy a property that had an expired lease, a felony offense." The room erupted. Board members looked at each other in panic. Julian, realizing his career was about to implode, quietly gathered his papers and slipped out the back door, abandoning his aunt on stage. At that exact moment, the double doors swung open, and Commissioner Davis marched in, flanked by 2 county deputies, their footsteps echoing like the bells of judgment. "Ms. Sterling," the commissioner announced, her voice cutting through the noise, "we need to have a conversation about interference with county auctions and misappropriation of funds. You need to come with us." Watching Karen being let out, screaming about conspiracies while the entire neighborhood watched in disgusted silence, was a level of satisfaction I wished Emily could have been there to see. The tyrant had fallen, crushed by the weight of her own arrogance. The fallout was swift. Karen resigned via email the next morning and vanished from the community view. Travis found a job 2 towns over to escape the shame. The Sterling regime collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. But the real victory wasn't destroying an enemy. It was rebuilding a community. As the new owner of the Marina, my first act was to restore free access to all original homeowners, honoring the 1994 promise. I kept Old Man Miller on as a consultant and promoted Tommy to manager, turning the place into a genuine community hub, not a profit machine. Property values in Pineview jumped 15% thanks to the accessible, friendly Marina. The atmosphere of suspicion evaporated, replaced by the sounds of boat engines and children's laughter on the weekends. And the thing that makes my chest tighten with pride, the thing that brings tears to my eyes every time I see it, is the Emily Memorial Saturday Fishing Program. Every Saturday at dawn, 25 kids swarm the dock, from shy 6-year-olds to awkward teenagers, all eager to learn how to thread a worm and cast a line. The smell of sunscreen mixes with the fresh lake air, and the sound of laughter fills the space that used to be silent with tension. Buster, my old dog, has become the world's most patient mascot, letting toddlers pet him while they wait for a bite. Mrs. Higgins sits nearby, teaching the kids about the history of the lake, planting seeds of respect for nature and community. Sometimes, I sit alone at the end of the pier, watching the beautiful chaos, and I whisper to the wind, "Look at this, Em. We did it." And I know she's smiling. From a lonely widower who just wanted to fish in peace, I accidentally became the resistance leader who toppled a dictator and healed a fractured neighborhood. But this story leaves me with a burning question about power and justice. Why do we so easily hand over control of our lives to people like Karen? Why do we wait until our backs are against the wall before we stand up for what is ours? Is justice only available to those who have the time, the money, and the sheer stubbornness to go all in like I did? And how many Karens are out there right now, ruling their little kingdoms because no one has dared to check the paperwork? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you're dealing with an HOA nightmare, don't stay silent. Share your story, because sometimes justice tastes sweetest when it's served together. Signing off from the dock. See you on the water.